Friday, November 28th, 2025, LEGO will launch its very first Star Trek set. It will be the USS Enterprise D from the Star Trek The Next Generation series, of course. I'm in my 50s and not a collector, but you can count on me spoiling my inner child by the end of this month. This is a review of champions, and I am your host, Grandmaster. With me is a powerful panel made up of the finest champions Sakar has to offer. Let me introduce them to you. First up, we have Mr. Taylor first, the original. How are you?
I'm excellent, thank you.
That's good to hear. And back after a long time, we have Merv. How are you, man?
Fantastic.
That's good to hear. This is episode 22 of the Star Trek project, in which we are reviewing Star Trek, all of it in order of release, kinda. And today we're going to talk about Star Trek Deep Space Nine Season 1. Yes, we are starting a review series for Deep Space Nine. But before we do, I want to ask you all to help us out. Like and share this video and subscribe to our channel. And if you really want more of us, you can join our ranks. Go to Sakar at sakar.freeforms.net. You can get there by clicking on the link in the description. And if you want, you can join us on our shows. Just talk to us on the board. As mentioned, we will be discussing the 20 episodes of Season 1 of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And, well, let's dive right into it. And we start off with our section, A Grandmaster Picks. And Grandmaster Picks is our section where I get to choose 3 episodes and my champions have to sign off on them and talk about them. And this time I picked Emissary, the opening episode, double episode. The second one I chose is The Negus, and the last one I chose is the final episode of the season, In the Hands of the Prophets. And I will give the floor to Merv. Merv, you are new to Star Trek, as people who follow the series know. You started Deep Space Nine. You have been hearing me and Lord Deathman especially talk a lot about Deep Space Nine, that it's the best thing ever. So you started to watch this. How do you feel about it?
I love it. I think it's really good right out of the gate. I think it starts with, and not to get right into it, but that episode Emissary, the opening 2-part pilot, essentially really sets the stage in a lot of ways for like all the characters, their positions within this Deep Space Nine, universe, and then like so much of the potential conflict, even if it's not conflict yet. Like there's so much that it sets the stage in a lot of ways with like the Bajoran and Cardassians, and then the whole wormhole and everything like that. And just overall, I thought it did a really good job continuing like the trajectory of the Next Generation, where you have this larger group of characters and balancing each individual storyline with larger storylines that involve everything. I just thought it was really good right out of the gate. It takes it. I will, especially for a first time, like anything else. The only characters I knew from this were Orion and Keiko, because right? Because they came over from the Next Generation. But every other character is new. So, like, especially these, first dozen or so episodes, or even all of season 1, really, I'm still like trying to figure out who these characters are. So, now in my watch, I'm a few seasons is past this, and it's like, oh, okay, this character, that character. But like at this point, it's like it's almost an overload of information of like, okay, this character's that, and they're kind of slimy, and they run a bar, and then this character, she's got some trauma, and blah blah blah, and this character like used to be an old guy, and it's a lot of that. So, my memory of the first several episodes is a little bit like, dipping my toes in the water because of all the new stuff that was thrown at me. But it was all very fun. I really liked it all a lot.
Yeah. Well, it's good to hear. I hope you get as enthusiastic as I and Lord Deathman are about this show. Well, let's talk about those three episodes I mentioned: Emissary, The Nagus, and In the Hands of the Prophets. I tried to focus a little bit more on the overarching story during our review series, and I'll let you guys do the really good, more standalone stuff. But those three episodes may not be the best of the season, but they all have like implications for later on in the story, as you may already have discovered in the in the show in your watch. So let's talk about it. Which one you want to kick off on with?
We'll just continue with the emissary. Again, like I said, I think it was a great starting point for um, at least the series, like in the first season, especially, but like the first couple seasons, it seems like they really did a really good job of setting the stage, because the if you the previous Star Trek that I've watched, it's all exploratory. So you take your familiar characters and you thrust them into some new situation. This one, it's stationary, so you got to bring the new situation to them. And I just think there's a slightly different dynamic there. You have to give them a reason for things to be happening constantly that isn't just like new like visitor of the week kind of thing. So I think the Bajoran conflict that's like ingrained in this, the Bajoran and Kardashian thing, the planet Bajor, the wormhole, and how it's like religious in that aspect, that all that stuff, like especially in this first two-parter, like really stood out to me as like setting the stage.
Mm-hmm.
The other big thing was, I think it's a great introduction to Cisco. And through there's moments in season one that like are as strong as he is here. I wish it kind of continued, but obviously there's a lot of characters to like uplift, so they have to like break away from him sometimes. But like in this episode, especially with his scene with Picard, I think he just comes across really like a strong character, that is different than Kirk and Picard, and has a different feel to him. And like there's a moment there where because he obviously kind of feels like Picard is responsible for his wife's death in a way. Obviously there's more to it than that, but you can tell he doesn't want to be in the room whenever he's talking to Picard, and Picard opens up like diplomatic, like he normally is, and then he gets a little bit, there's a little bit of a sassy like undertone between the two of them, and whenever Picard gets into like his condescending mode of like, oh, maybe they should find a new guy, Cisco like stands up, and you're thinking like, oh, he's like this far away from punching Picard in the face, and it's going to go down. And at this point, you've not really seen Cisco in action, so you don't know how he'd stand up to Picard, who we've seen through several seasons and movies and whatnot. But he's emotional, and I wouldn't want to fight Cisco in a bare knuckle fight. It doesn't, even just in this one scene. So that stood out to me as far as the emissary goes. The Nagus was a really great, like, I don't want to say introductory because we've seen the Ferengi before, but I feel like that was a really great in-depth look at Ferengi society and how they interact with one another and like their ideals and goals on all aspects. Like obviously there's the big storyline with like Quark becoming the Nagus and that whole political, machinations and all that stuff, where he's basically this far away from getting thrown out of an airlock. But even the stuff with I forget his son's name, Nog, Rom and Nog. Rom's his brother, Nog's his brother's son.
Yeah.
Even the stuff there, like just the different generational, like, oh, humans and Ferengi never really get along because we have totally different ideals. But seeing Nog and Jake, Cisco's son, getting along and like hitting it off, that's actually kind of a nice touch, showing that like even though up till now people haven't been able to get along, these two seem to be doing it just fine. So maybe it's not totally impossible for humans and Ferengis to actually see eye to eye. So I thought that was all really neat. And Wallace Shawn playing the Grand Nagus or whatever. I think I said this on the board, but it didn't matter how much makeup. You can't hide his voice. His voice can go through anything. Like the second you hear it, you just know exactly who it is.
By the way, belated happy birthday to him, because he had his birthday earlier this week, as Taylor always posts on the board. So.
Nice. And then In the Hands of the Prophet, I thought was a really good season ender, and obviously it ties back to the wormhole and the not politics, but the like religion of Bajor, which I think is only lightly. I mean, it's touched upon in like early in the season in a couple episodes maybe, but this one really feels like it nailed it home and really gave you a look at like the influences on in like Bejor's new political world or whatever, how that goes. I thought it was a really good season ender, particularly whenever they're figuring out that I can't remember the character's name, but the woman who's getting ready to shoot the um, Bajoran
Yeah.
leader, who she's Bajoran also, but they're like figuring out it's her, and it keeps cutting back and forth between like O'Brien in the room, like saying, "Oh, I think it was her. She's my assistant." Blah blah blah, and then Cisco like at this thing, and the Bajorans. There's like this real tense music behind everything, and even these like mundane scenes that are just like, oh, you're just waiting for something to happen. When it finally does, it's actually really satisfying. I thought there was really good build up there for
Yeah.
that moment. And it gave you a lot of in-depth look at the religion of Bajor. So I thought that was really cool episode.
The
Really
character.
good episodes, the three you picked.
Yeah. The character's name you were looking for was Neela, played by
Yeah, Neela.
Robin Christopher. There you go. And of course, but I will let Taylor sign off on those three episodes first. Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with everything Merv said. The Emissary, of course, is a great introduction to the series. Cisco, of course, is played by Avery Brooks, who is a great actor. Previous to this, his most famous role was on a show in the 80s called Spencer for Hire, where he played Hawk, and he had a short-lived spin-off called A Man Called Hawk, but that one didn't take off, unfortunately, but he did a great job on that show. Very different character than Benjamin Sisko. So actors can play more than one character. um, Again, the whole thing with him losing his wife at Wolf 359, having to raise his son alone, not being thrilled with this particular assignment, not even sure if he wants to stay in Starfleet, but then everything happens. The wormhole is discovered. He goes there. He talks to the wormhole aliens, the prophets, the non-linear time, whatever you want to call these people who live in the wormhole, and finds out that he's declared the emissary, which of course is the religious prophet messiah of the Bajoran religion, whatever you want to call it, religious leader.
Yeah.
Which of course makes him very important to Starfleet because they want Bajor in the Federation, and they want to make sure Cardassia does not grow again and threaten Bajor. So they want him to stay there. So again, it sets up a very intriguing situation, very different than what we've seen in Star Trek prior. We learn a little bit about, again, the different factions in Bajor, the political. Of course, they've just gotten their freedom after, 50 years of occupation by the Cardassians. There were, rebel groups and different factions, and lots of attacks and dirty things had to be done to drive the Cardassians out. And of course, as we saw in Next Generation, war between the Federation and the Cardassians, peace treaty signed, borders redrawn. So all very tense political situation, which is something that we don't see as much of in previous Star Trek.
Yeah.
But this first episode, really sets that up quite well.
Yeah. I would argue it's maybe even the best first episode of all Star Trek shows.
I wouldn't want to argue it, actually, because they did a really good job. Whereas, like in the original series, which was, of course, was 100% episodic, they really didn't have continuing storylines, which is the way it was done back then. And then in the Next Generation, I don't think at the start they really knew everything that they wanted to do. Whereas here, they appeared to have at least a framework of a plan, a framework of a situation that was going to be a continuing situation, as opposed to just episodes. So
Actually, what you're mentioning here is quite unique for back when it first started to air. I think
yes.
it was 1992, 1993.
I think in 93 it started, I think.
Yeah, but before that, networks were afraid to have continuous series in serialized shows on TV because if people missed an episode, they drop out and stuff like that. and actually Star Trek. And they mentioned this in a great documentary, which I highly recommend to watch after you've seen the show in its entirely, What We Left Behind, which of
Hmm.
course refers to the final episode named What You Leave Behind. And they refer to that Deep Space Nine actually started what we have now today, a lot of serialized TV shows on streaming and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So uh, Deep Space Nine was quite unique in that way. And they still managed to be also like, episodic and serialized at the same time, which is actually quite nice because you can
Yeah.
still watch separate Deep Space Nine episodes today and have a good 45 minutes while it's also part of an overarching story, which is excellent. That writer's room was brilliant, I may add. So this
Yes.
is my first statement on how great I think Deep Space Nine is. But now I'll let Taylor continue. You will hear that from me the coming 6 months.
Yes. And it was 1993 that the show
Okay,
started.
thank you, Taylor.
And it is like the Next Generation, it was a syndicated show, so it aired in different markets at different times.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as far as Negus goes, like Merv said, we really start learning about Ferengi, which is another unique thing about this show. They are able to explore these different cultures more deeply than previous shows were. The Next Generation would have Ferengis show up for one episode, and then 2 seasons later, we'd have Ferengis, for another episode. But you could never really meet them. We never got to know them really, other than through the view screen of the Enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas here they're living side by side together. And then this show also, of course, does that with other cultures, including the Cardassians and the Bajorans and later the Klingons. So we get to learn a lot more about these different societies. And of course, Negus, introduces us a lot to Ferengi. And of course, the rest of this show, we learn a great deal about Ferengi. And do I dare say we come to love the Ferengis over time? Maybe we do.
My favorite character in the show is a Ferengi, the earlier mentioned Nog. So
Nog.
yeah.
Nog is cool. Really short, but cool. Maybe he's tall for a Ferengi. I don't know. But and then the last one, of course, the season finale, the In the Hands of the Prophets. Again, as Murph said, great episode. Really pointing out another theme of this show that we don't get much in other Star Trek, of course, is the political intrigue. And the different political and religious factions, which on a very religious planet like Bajor, those things kind of overlap a great deal. The religion and the politics, that's fine. That's who they are. Major Kira, of course, we see a lot of, and at least in this first season, she's torn quite a bit into what her loyalties are. At first, she's not even sure she wants Bajor in the in the Federation. She doesn't know who should be administering Bajor, who should be in charge, which is the best way to rule it, and so on. But these attempted assassinations in this episode, in the hands of the Prophet, of course, push her, help her clarify her thoughts quite a bit. And of course, we have I've forgotten her name, but the female Bajoran religious leader who is kind of a
Vedic Win
constant
here.
thorn. Yes,
Vedic
her.
Win, played by
her
the immortal Louis Fletcher.
yes, from One Flew Over Cuckoo's Nest, right?
Yes, absolutely.
But yeah, we see more of her, and we'll see more of her, of course, as time goes on. She's an important figure, very smart, very devious,
Yeah.
and formidable throughout the show. So
And
again, three great episodes.
yeah, absolutely. And I like it that in the hands of the prophets, I always see as the first part of the 4-part story, which includes the first 3 episodes of season 2, which we will talk about next month, of
Mhm.
course. But it's officially it's not, but it feels like it's a 4-parter because it immediately goes back to that theme and brings back Vedic Win and everything that's going on. But anyway, thank you for signing off on my picks. Now, Taylor, I'm going to go to you. Do you have any episodes you want to talk about, which I didn't mention?
I mean, there's a lot of great episodes. I think rather than pulling out specific episodes, I just want to mention a couple of things about this first season, a little bit in general.
Okay.
Again, the setting. Another thing I love about this setting is, as opposed to having your standard 7-8 person crew that are interacting in every episode. They're in a location where different people are coming and going all the time, which creates storytelling opportunities galore. Another thing I like about this is almost all of our main cast, virtually all of our main cast, have never met each other and never worked together before. They are learning about each other as we are learning about them
Yeah.
and learning to work and function as a team. Of course, the setting itself, the fact that it is a Cardassian space station originally, and they have to meld Federation technology into Cardassian technology, which of course sets up, storylines, but it also just gives it such a unique look. I love the look of all the Cardassian screens and the different instrumentality and stuff on the ship, and how it differs from what we see on starships. They have the runabouts. I always love when we get new types of ships in Star Trek, and I love the little runabouts. Very, very fun little ships. And then the people. Odo. We don't learn a whole lot about Odo in this first season. We learn a little bit here and there. We know he's a changeling. He's a shapeshifter. Doesn't really know where he comes from or who shapeshifters are. But of course, he's played by Rene Auberjonois, who was a very successful character actor. Did a lot of guest starring roles on TV. He had actually guest starred on an episode of Wonder Woman, where the episode took place at a sci-fi convention. So it was kind of interesting. But his most famous role prior to this was on the sitcom Benson, where he played Clayton Endicott III for many years. And that's a very good show, Benson. It's a spinoff of Soap, which was also a really great show. But that was what he was best known for at this point in his life. Again, mostly comedy and character roles, and usually most of his character roles were villains. Just from he played villains in, like I said, Wonder Woman and Charlie's Angels and multiple other shows. So here he gets to play a very unique character, and of course we're all going to get to know that. Other actors, of course, Quark. He, of course, is the face of the Ferengi for most of this series. Armin Shimmerman plays him. Another character actor. Previously, he had played a supporting role on the fantasy series Beauty and the Beast in the 1980s. That was the only place I really knew him from, but I know he did a lot of other smaller roles. Another thing I like about this show, we already mentioned that there's a lot of political intrigue, a lot of military aspects to it, but then there's also the criminal underworld aspect of it. They use a lot of noir type tropes in this show, and of course Odo is a very good detective as chief of security, and they get to play with that in a lot of storylines as well. So I think these are all things that I find really interesting. Other side characters that we also meet in the first season, of course, Gul Dukat, who is the former Cardassian ruler or commander of this space station, who's now fighting his own battles with the Cardassian government and trying to keep his position of power. And of course, Garrick, who we don't see a whole lot in the first season. We see him in a couple of episodes. The only Cardassian living on Deep Space Nine. And he, of course, will become a very interesting character in the future. But I just think all of these things come together real well, in addition to all the other characters, Dax and Bashir and Kira and O'Brien and Keiko and little Molly. We get to see all of them. So again, I just think it's such a great and unique situation in the Star Trek universe, and they don't have to change anything in the Star Trek universe to do it. They don't have to break canon every 5 minutes. Okay, there's some retcons. There always is going to be some retcons when you're dealing with something this big. And then of course the big elephant in the room, which is only only a little bit touched on in this first season, of course, is the wormhole to the Gamma Quadrant, which no one knows anything about, and everyone's like all excited. We can explore it. We can commercially benefit from it. The Ferengi think they can open up trade routes into the air, but we have no idea what's in the Gamma Quadrant, and we are going to find out as time goes on. And of course, what makes Deep Space Nine important is that it's right next to that all-important wormhole that everybody wants, the the Romulans, the Klingons, the Cardassians, the Bajorans, and Starfleet. Everyone wants access to that wormhole, which makes, whereas Sisko kind of thought he was being sent to some backwater assignment, he's now one of the most important guys in the whole Starfleet because of that.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's just a great situation, and I think this first season really piques your interest to want more.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Murph, you mentioned before you didn't want to get into a brawl with Cisco. Did you come to that conclusion after watching Cubus?
And no, it was mostly just how emotional he got at seemingly the drop of a hat whenever he was just done with the conversation with Picard.
Mm-hmm.
It just seemed like he just turned from like, I'm just going to sit here stalemate, and then within a second he was just towering over him, and I was just like, he's going to punch him in a quarter of a second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He did punch Q.
I'm not sure he what's that?
He did punch Q.
Okay. It's I can't remember. But
Q only visited Deep Space Nine once, got punched in the nose, and then he never came back.
Now I got to rewatch that one just because I don't remember, and then it's like something that I feel like everyone wanted to do for so many years. Just punch Q in the face.
Yeah. But do you have episodes you want to talk about?
Yeah, I had one or two that I thought I'd bring up. And they both kind of involve a character that initially I didn't really have that high on my, like, I enjoy this character radar. But then, like any, especially like The Next Generation or any show like this, the second they start getting more centrally focused in a storyline, it's like, oh, okay, I really like this character now. And that character, in my case, is Kira, who, like, for the first, quarter of a season, maybe even half a season, like, she was fine, but she didn't stand out. And then the episode Progress happened, where, she goes down to, I don't remember if it's a moon or something, but either way, there's like some Bajoran like refugees or whatever that are in this area, and either the planet's getting destroyed or it's getting co-opted by Cardassia or whatever, but they need to relocate essentially, and they're just like, we're not going anywhere. And throughout the entirety of the story, like, Kira is facing this emotional burden because of everything that's happened with the occupation of Bajor and like her whole position and everything. And she, in her heart, doesn't want to tell specifically this old man that she befriends, that he has to relocate or do anything different. Like, this old man just wants to live peacefully on this planet until he dies. And whether that's tomorrow or 100 years from now, it doesn't seem like it matters to him, whether or not he's just not leaving. He's through running, essentially, is what the vibe you get. And there's a moment towards the end of the episode where, because Kira basically shirks all her duties and goes down and helps him, like he's building like a kiln or something, or his funeral pyre. I don't remember all the details, but she's assisting him and living with him and all this stuff. And Sisko shows up, and he basically gives her like almost like a come to Jesus speech of like, this is you now. It's not too late for you, but if you keep doing what you're doing, like, your fate isn't sealed, essentially. Like he says it much more poetic than I can reiterate. But that moment right there, for both of those characters, for me, really stands out. For Kira, because it was like, until that moment, she was still fighting from like a disadvantage. Her whole perspective was like, you're at a disadvantage, and now she realizes, due to this conversation, that like she is essentially part of the power in this area, and she has to make harder decisions now. It's not all just punching upwards. Sometimes it's like hard truths and like doing what you need to do for the sake of duty, rather than letting it all fall apart for your own emotion. And I really think that was a powerful scene between the two. And I really liked Sisko in that scene because you get to see him kind of more empathetic than I feel like is with anyone that's not Jake, for the most part. But also, like, this is your commanding officer. and if you don't want to do this, that's fine, but like it's going to ruin everything for you moving forward. You know what I mean? It's really like a duty versus emotion kind of moment for those characters, and he kind of reiterates that. And I feel like that's something similar that he almost went through in the pilot episode, or the two-parter, in a way of like, you know, putting your baggage back there for a minute and just, you know, seeing, you know, how needed you actually are in this, you know, new world that they're still in the process of building, it feels like. And then the other one after that really, like, you know, further propelled Kira up my list as far as like favorite characters for this season was Duet. And I apologize because I didn't rewatch it recently, but it stood out as like one of my favorites whenever I did watch it. But you know, the basic premise being that like there's a Cardassian higher up who shows up under a different name, and they're like, oh, he's like basically a war criminal kind of sort. And then there's so many revelations in so many things you think you're like, oh, what's actually so and so? It's not him. It's somebody else. Oh, it turns out, you know, there's so many twists and turns to that story, and at the end of it, you're just like almost emotionally exhausted because he is, you know, essentially he was the assistant to. Oh, I guess spoiler. He was the assistant to like the higher up guy, and he's so racked with guilt over the things that he saw or helped with during this Bajoran occupation that like he essentially seeks eternal punishment. He wants them to execute him, you know, or punish him in some way because he feels he deserves that. And that moment is like emotional and heartbreaking, and you're just like, this guy put himself through torture just because he felt he deserved it. And seeing that a lot of that through Kira's eyes really like, you know, because she hates these people, you know. So for her to, you know, come to a moment of like emotional empathy towards this person and, you know, forgive him essentially, like I thought that was all really well done, like in one of the strongest episodes of this season.
Yeah, absolutely. Duet is considered a top 10 episode for Deep Space Nine, actually, by most people.
Yeah. That character, of course, was played by Harris Yulin, who was fantastic.
Yeah,
Did a great job.
absolutely.
And that previous episode you talked about, of course, the old man was played by Brian Keith, who was a great actor from back in the day, too.
Yeah, those two episodes you picked were excellent, and if I had not limited myself to focus on the overarching story, I would have picked those two episodes because they're absolutely great. Especially Progress, which you mentioned, is also a moment for Kira where she realizes that she's no longer the resistance fighter, but she's
Right.
now in a military officer, and she needs to do things for the greater good, which may not feel right, but when you look at it from a logical standpoint, it is, of course, the right thing to do.
She has to enforce rules to support the government, as opposed to blowing things up to try to bring down the government.
Yeah, exactly, and it brings back the very old theme in Star Trek: the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. So, yeah, which they violate on a regular basis as well, by the way. But it's a different story. But no, excellent choices. Overall, first season, how strong was it? If you compare it to like Voyager, yeah, you can't tell me Merv yet, but like Next Generation, or it's a very strong first season, I think.
Yeah, I thought it was a very strong first season. I feel like a lot like what I don't remember if it was you or Taylor that mentioned it, but like where the Next Generation wasn't sure if they found their footing like for the first couple seasons, and then eventually they did really find their footing and hit a groove. This felt like it knew that groove that it wanted to hit right out of the gate. It felt like it took I don't know if it was the same creative team or whatever, but it felt like it was like they took the hurdles and the problems that they ran through with like the first couple seasons of Next Generation, and by the time this came around, they were like, boom, you know, we know exactly where we need to go, exactly what we need to set up. Mm-hmm. So I thought, you know, it's hard to compare, especially when you get into like the totally different eras, like the original series and stuff like that. First seasons or anything like that. But I thought this was a really strong episode of television. Again, if there's any I don't even want to say it's a flaw, because I felt like by the end of this season I knew all these characters, but that's always my biggest hurdle with like a new season of television is like they throw so much at you that like sometimes it takes a rewatch for me to really see what they were doing, because I don't know if I'm supposed to pay attention to every single character or just this one or that one, like which ones are like really important, which ones are only going to be here for like half an episode. For example, like the like Kira's rebel friend who showed up for like one episode, you know, and it was like, well, am I ever going to see him again? Should I remember who this is? Do I need to know his name and the faction he came from and all this stuff? But in so far, a few seasons later, I don't. But at the time I'm watching that episode, you know, I'm like, that's kind of where the way my brain works. But as far as like television goes, I thought this was fantastic, especially in regards to Star Trek. And like I said, I think it's a different animal in a way. Like it's still Star Trek, but because they're not seeking out like the way the other shows were, like they're not necessarily like stumbling across this or, you know, checking out this planet and that sort of thing. Like it's a different kind of problem constantly that has to find them. And I think that really creates more unique, I don't say more unique, but different kind of unique storylines, at least through this first season.
Yeah, I'm going to move along home to Taylor. Your thoughts and feelings on season 1?
Well, yeah, I think it's a stronger season 1 than the Next Generation's season 1. And of course, they have the benefit of the Next Generation had created this universe for them to to plug into, whereas Next Generation, of course, had to find its way creating this new. Yes, there was the original series, but this was, 100 years later or however many years later. And they kind of had to create from scratch a lot of things. So this show, of course, had the benefit of all of that had been established in the Next Generation. But it also had some really great writing and a lot of really great actors who seemed to know exactly what they were supposed to be doing from the get-go.
Yeah.
That I think just made this a better first season than Next Generation's first season.
Yeah. If I can mention only one flaw which I've that they had in Deep Space Nine in the beginning, which they corrected later on while the season progressed, is that they made Benjamin Sisko a commander and not a captain. I know Will Riker was very popular at the time, and they wanted to like make a commander the main figure, but I think it would have been nice if he was a captain from the get-go, but that's just a feeling I have. But like I said, that's a minor nitpick from my side. So, but anyway, as I mentioned before to you guys, I didn't mention it on the channel yet, but we're going to do in the end of our Deep Space Nine series, we're going to do a top 10 ranking. Taylor, I'm asking you, because Merv isn't finished yet with the whole show, do you think an episode from season 1 will show up in your top 10 in the end?
Boy, that's tough because there's 6 more seasons of really great episodes. But I'm not going to say which, but I think there's a good chance that one episode from season 1 will make the top 10.
Okay. Merv, you're not finished, of course, so you don't really have a clue. But do you have a feeling one may show up in your top 10, and you don't disclose which one it would be?
I mean, I could probably narrow it down to a couple of potentials, but obviously, I don't know how much better things could get. You know, if the Next Generation is any indication, I do feel like there's step ups to be made. As the seasons go on, as far as intriguing storylines go. So I look forward to seeing yes or no. But I would say there's a chance at least 1 or 2 of these might be in there. Well, maybe just 1 if there's that many seasons.
Well, I'm excited for your journey and for what's to come. But anyway, that will conclude this month's episode of the Star Trek Project. We hope you have enjoyed our discussion today. If you did, you can help us out. Like and share this review and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And you can join our forum at sarcardo.freeforms.net, of course. We would love it if you do that. Episode 23 of the Star Trek Project, we will be discussing Star Trek Deep Space Nine Season 2. Who was expecting that? But for now, I want to thank you all, also on behalf of our champions, and wish you to live long and prosper. Bye.